Okay, good. We are live. Where do I begin? So,
On the middle path. That's where we begin.
just real quickly, uh, so I want to give a little bit of a backstory as to why we're sharing this today. Shane and I, at the end of every year, we always have a look at the potential energy of what might be coming for the next year. And it's been quite useful for us in preparation in how our mindset and how we think, and a lot of the decisions that we make when it comes to business decisions or investing decisions. So we do have a look, and we're going to be sharing a lot more information than what we normally have been. But we've been having a closer look at what we look at the trends that happen or the patterns in cosmology and economics, and we study some people who have been studying this for centuries. How many? 10 years?
No,
What's that?
yeah, decades.
Decades. That's why I have Shane. Um, who've been studying this and specialize in this, and it's quite useful information. And what we found for next year is what's really important is basically 2021 is setting us up for 2022. And it kind of happens every year that way. There's something that happens in a particular year that sets you up for being able to manage or get through the next year. It's pretty much all divine and intentional, or should I say, there's a certain flow to the universe, right? So what we found, I know you're itching to say something.
No,
Well,
I'm
okay.
I'm not. You continue on.
So what we found was the importance of taking the middle path in light of extreme conditions. So we'll talk about this from a couple different perspectives as well, from micro and macro. So if we want to have a look at the big picture right now, the perspective that let's go out and then zoom in to how it correlates to us personally in relationships and individually. But let's start for what's happening in the big picture out there right now. Let's talk just real briefly about the archetype of Saturn and Jupiter. They're both very opposite sides of the fulcrum. They do have, dark sides and light side expressions, and coming from archetypal psychology. So let's look at just real sort of generally is that, whilst Jupiter is a planet about growth and expansion, the Saturn is about restrictions and discipline. So each side of those again has a light side and a dark side, but also what's happening right now is it seems that we're noticing a lot of the extremes of both. There's extreme restrictions and there's extreme growth, and a lot of it is happening at the same time.
Growth, maybe not, but expansion of certain things. Growth is not always expansion, and growth is not always healthy. Expansion of money supply is an expansion that is not healthy. That is not healthy for anyone, which is going into inflation right now. And so that's a major concern that's happening. Expansion of medical tyranny is another expansion that is happening that is not good for anyone. So, you can see that, as Angie mentioned, just these archetypes of what they mean. You've got this really weird this really weird situation where you have lots of restriction and lots of expansion happening all at the same time, and it causes these extreme kind of situations to come to hand. And how it makes me the analogy that comes up for me in these things is that when I was in the military during the preparation for special forces, you do what is called resistance to interrogation training. And the interesting thing about resistance to interrogation is what they're training you for is they're training you to be fatigued and still be able to make decisions, still be able to make life-saving decisions, be able to get through life-threatening situations. And right now, the average group of people or persons is now at the extreme end of exhaustion. They've been sleep deprived. They've been deprived of freedoms. And this is the process that an authority will step through to make people submissive. So you've got this expansion of all these things that take freedom away, and then now they're clamping down and taking what they want and making sure that they can control everybody. And it's not a conscious type of situation. It's kind of what happens.
Well, it's in the stars, apparently.
It is. I mean, this is one of those. You know, it's obviously weird to be reading this as an archetype for the planet, but if you look at it on balance and you match it, overlay it against what's happening right now, you can see that the outcome of this tug of war between discipline and expansion creates these conditions where people can get fatigued and be easily controlled, and that's a huge problem right now for us at the moment. But it is a phase, and this too shall pass. And I think that's something that's really important to remember. Now, why we mention the middle path in this is because this is the way that you get through this type of situation where there's lots of tyranny, there's lots of control, there's lots of things that are expanding out of control. Think monetary system, think the information sphere that is just completely out of control. You've got World Bank, central government, governments and that are actually not being truthful when they're stating stuff at the moment. There's a lot of misinformation coming from everywhere. So you've got these massive expansions and these massive contractions happening. And so the middle path is the way to get through it. And the middle path is just not getting sucked into either side of this, not either side of being too controlled. Or like seeing, everything inflate around. There's opportunities. There's, house prices are going crazy. So people will go out and borrow on their mortgage and over leverage themselves. And, government spending is at an all-time high. So people are getting free money. There's no such thing, but they're getting.
And they're not done yet.
They're getting money. They're getting money from the government in their businesses and things like that. I mean, we've heard stories of people who, during the pandemic, the government just offered them $400,000 for their business. They didn't need it, but they were like, well,
Thanks.
if it's handed out, I'm going to take it. So, sometimes we have to decline these things that are being offered to us, even when it's a medical procedure that's being offered. Sometimes it's best just to decline that as well as money being offered out by the government. Sometimes it's best just to decline and stay in the middle path.
Well, let's now take it down to the micro level, into the individual. Because yes, whilst lots of things are happening on the external environment, let's bring it into the internal environment a little bit more. So, how this might be expressed in the internal environment is, the extreme of either side is of, let's say, emotions, for example, is you've got extreme, anger and reactivity as one side. And then on the other side, you've got apathy and you just don't care because when our heads are full, sometimes you can't take on more information, or you get more information, you go, react to it, or you get apathetic about it and go, I don't care, I'm over it. And this is a dangerous place to be, both those sides, because both those sides is a reactive measure. And we'll have our thoughts run in a particular way that may not make sense, and then we make decisions for short-term resolution to long-term problems, which long-term will have effects. So the big one is the money printing that's happening right now, or here, let's solve our, especially I'm talking about the US right now, printing money to solve their debt problem, saying, it's fine now, but what's going to happen in 23 and 24?
No one's thought about the downstream.
No one's thought about the downstream. So they're just trying to do short-term fixes. And of course, there's the medical procedures right now, short-term fixes for long-term problems. We're going to be sharing a lot more about these things and how we kind of come to the conclusions for ourselves, if you want to watch and listen along, if you're open to other ideas. And these are just perspectives, and this is what works for us. With the extremes, taking the middle path, it requires disengaging from the ego. It requires of letting go of having to try to prove something.
Well, let's drill down on that, because it's easy.
From the emotional
it's easy,
perspective.
It's easy to say to disengage from the ego, but
What I mean is like fighting back, because fighting back is still an extreme.
no. Well, let's define something here. I think it's important. Your ego is required. It's totally
Yes.
required. It's a part of your consciousness. It's a part of you. So it's not something that I believe the term that you're getting at is the poor choices that you make, that you consciously make, rather than the ego. I think it's important to define that.
Yes.
Because poor choices is not the ego getting in the way of something. Poor choices is poor choices. it's you choosing to go along with something, choosing to take something, choosing to thinking that you have no choice but to take something is also a choice. And so I think I just think it's important that we just
Yes.
establish that.
So let me give an example of what I meant. From the ego perspective, going into battle, and it could be going into battle against your partner, your kids. It could be going into battle against your government. It could be going into battle against, people who don't believe the same way that you believe. It's exhausting, and it drains you of energy. It puts you into that fight or flight mode, and it drains you of your soul and it leaves you depleted at the end of the day. And it's no wonder that we go to other sort of substance extremes to numb ourselves to it, because we feel so reactive. And really that comes down to about control, trying to control the environment, external and internal. So if we have a look, getting to, let's call it getting to the eye of the storm, where the storm is around you and then here is you, and not getting caught up in the whirlwind of what's happening. How do you get that? Easier said than done, is what I hear lots of people say. For us, we have a bit of a giggle about it, because it's like if you and I are getting into a heated discussion, we know that those triggers are things that we need to have a look at.
Well, it's a recognition of, whether you recognize immediately that you are getting emotional or you're getting angry. As soon as you have that recognition that you're answering from emotion, and this is where I think you're getting to the ego, which again is a choice. So it's a choice to back off and not engage while you're emotional. And so, I think that when we talk about these things, it's becoming more and more aware of your emotions. And the tool that we often use and that we recommend to a lot of people for that is when you become acutely aware of your breathing, you're becoming acutely aware of the thermostat for your emotions, because your emotions will come into your breathing as soon as you notice your breathing. Okay, and you're getting emotional, your breathing's going to match that. So your breathing is a way for you to bridge across and understand, do I need to be in this argument or in this fight, or do I not? Or can I go away, walk it off, breathe it off, have a little bit of time out before I come back and answer? Or even in the moment, can you take a breath through your nose and pause and not say the first thing that comes into your mind, right? Not just blurt out the first thing. And that will often, if we were to look at that through history, that whole don't blurt out the first thing or don't take the first action that comes to you, most of the wars in the world would have been solved by that, because most of the wars in the world, most of the problems on the planet have come from knee-jerk reactions.
And an underlying agenda.
And reactions based not on all the facts or all the information. And that's happening a lot right now. A lot of what's going on around us is based off knee-jerk reaction that has had no really rigorous research put into the back of it. Most of the government policies that are out there right now, most of the things that are going on in the medical world right now, a lot of it's just gone off knee-jerk reactions.
Yes.
Without the time to actually stop, go inward. And so I know we keep kind of coming out of these analogies, but the analogy is that you have this internal version of this discipline and control and the ability to restrain yourself from reacting and blurting things out, or reacting and saying something that you'll regret later. And then we also have these externalities, these external, wider societal kind of knee-jerk reactions. And so while you can't do a lot about the societal stuff, you can do a lot about your internal state. You can do a lot about taking yourself out for a couple of seconds, even if that just means taking 1 to 2 to 3 breaths before you answer a question, before you react to something, will allow you enough time to process and maybe glean some more information or some more facts, or recognize your own truth, or recognize the truth of the situation as well, which is slightly different. We'll get into that in another time, I think.
And how you create your future is in the moment. So when you say the thing straight off the bat, that will take you in one direction. When you take a breath and not say it, or say something else, that will take you in a very different future. So if we're looking at, if you want to change like where you're going in life, it starts in the moment, and making changes and being more aware of your breathing and making different choices. So before I share the second thing that is recommended for focusing on, I would say these are recommendations that we live by in our own household, and we'll be sharing a little bit more of this on how to work through 2022, because we think it's important. So one is low reactivity, or manage your reactivity. That would be one. Let's not call it ego like I was going to, but releasing reactivity is a number one thing. If you can get past that, you're winning. And if you need some references to that, we do have the Breathing Studio in an app feature, which will take you through various different practices that you can do on a daily basis, from 3 minutes to 30 minutes. Send me a message, or I can drop a link if you want to. They're just resources and tools for helping you should you need a little bit of extra help. Now that's one. The next thing, I've got my notes here because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. And the other one was, this is a good one. Dissolve the threats to one another and forgiving oneself and one another. So I think that comes part and parcel with releasing reactivity, because then you don't have to threaten others or threaten yourself.
Yeah, I think forgiveness is one of those things that I think a lot of people throw that word around, but what does it really mean to be able to forgive someone? This brings up a really interesting. I asked a question of someone that I was having a conversation with. This was during the elections, in the US elections last year. And I asked them the question.
Get some reactions.
I asked them the question. I said, would you be able to send Donald Trump some good vibes, some love, some love, some like a prayer,
him.
like a prayer? Could you pray for them? Because and the response was the response was almost a hate-filled type of response. And what I thought was interesting about that is that, number one, it's interesting that this person could hate somebody who they don't know. They don't know that person. They hate the idea of that person, but they don't actually know the person. I thought that was quite interesting. So could you forgive somebody that you don't know? Even if you were able to bring yourself to forgive that person and send them good vibes, or say a prayer for them in the hope that they would become better or act in a better way, or be a more courageous leader, can you do that? And why could you not do that? Do you think that would change the way that you view yourself and the world around you? Because one of the really important parts here is, whoever you hate on, it's a projection. So you're projecting out.
That's the
so whatever
truth.
you see in other people is often in you, and that's a thing you hate, if that's the word that you use. And so you've got to be very careful about what you are willing and not willing to do when it comes to forgiveness. Because if you're not willing to forgive something or someone, and this goes deep into whether things have been done wrong to you and all that kind of stuff, and there's levels to it, so I don't pretend to go into everyone's personal levels. But you've got to ask yourself the question, if it's a projection, then when you are forgiving, you're actually forgiving yourself. And I think that that's the hard part, because it's an actual loop that goes around. So this practice of forgiveness, of redemption, of people being able to make mistakes and forgiving them, I think is going to come into focus and be a major part of especially the next couple of years. The next couple of years, forgiving, allowing people to redeem themselves, or offering redemption to people is going to be a major part.
Well, growing up with my father as a pastor, one of the things that we heard all the time was, in the Bible it talks about love thy enemies, and that always seemed to be a very difficult part. But I did always just really respect. There was a lot of people that were able to do it, and I think it's regardless of religion, it is a really good general truth to live by, because again, anger, aggression, holding on to resentment will drain your body of energy. It will suck the life out of your soul. Another one.
It doesn't.
If I could be so blunt.
It doesn't mean that what has happened to you or other people is justified. I think it's important to remember that no actions of harm are ever justified, but it's your ability to be able to let go and forgive more yourself than other people or other things. And I think that's an important part, and it's a muscle that you build. It's like the devotional muscle. It's something that you practice doing over and over again, no matter how clunky it feels or how odd it feels, because that's the very nature of letting go, is being able to practice that forgiveness. And it's going to be a skill that you're going to want to have over the next couple of years.
Well, think of it like this. Anger and resentment have a particular breeding pattern that will cause tension in your body, and it will be in different parts of your body depending on where you have, different traumas or, whatever's going on with your body. For me, I carry a lot of it in my neck and my shoulders and my upper back. And as of lately, I've noticed some tension happening in my hips. So, for me, I revisit this and go, okay, well, the reactivity is sorted. Do I carry any resentment? Is there anything I need to let go there? And then once I begin to let go of those emotional barriers, I start breathing in a different way, and therefore start letting go of tension and start relaxing and start enjoying life a little bit more. And then I would say only then we're ready for this third part. And this third part is around reform and rebuild. So the importance of this is that you cannot reform and rebuild until the other matters are settled first. You can't recreate something unless you've destroyed and let go of an old way of being or an old thing. It is a cycle. It is part of the cycle, and this is how we start getting into our flow and into rhythm. And if we're having trouble feeling like we're enjoying the world in an extreme environment, these are some of the things that we can have a look at to go, okay, well, let's take care of this in the internal environment. And then therefore we start looking at the external environment very differently.
What we're describing and talking about sounds simple, but it is not easy. It's probably one of the hardest things that most people will ever endure in their life, and that is letting go of small injustices, letting go of big injustices, letting go of these things. And it's a tough ask. It's a tough ask. It takes will, and it takes energy, and it takes for quite a hard stagger up a steep incline. But there's no other way that you get around it, because you will carry those injustices and you'll carry that resentment, and that resentment and injustice weighs you down. And usually what you need to do then is try and numb yourself or drug yourself or put yourself away so that you're not experiencing that suffering. But it's always going to be present there. It's inevitable that it will be there, unless you're willing to do that, unless you're willing to build that will. And that's, really why we kind of like turn to a breathing practice and have that as one of it, is because you're already breathing. If you can focus some energy into something that you're already doing, and then that helps you build the will, and then that helps to stabilize the physiology, starts to make you feel better, you start to feel more expansive, and then you're able to then overcome some of these issues that you have.
Well, that's really interesting because the expansiveness is around, a trait of the Jupiter archetype. And before you can get there requires the Saturn, the light side of the Saturn sort of archetype, which is discipline. Bringing in, but discipline, Shane, this is his words, but I think it's very relevant, is turning discipline into devotion. Because, that's why, growing up in a religious environment was so amazing, because devotional and discipline was normal. It was, pray every day. It was, hand your fears over, and,
yeah, we're not advocating for a religion per se, or a doctrine or anything like that, but it's the framework that a religion will give you. It's the framework of devotional practices or of disciplinary aspects that are required in order for you to get yourself above the restrictive nature of all the programming and the repression and all of these sorts of things that are currently culminating and holding everyone down. So,
which takes us to another planet archetype, which is Pluto, which isn't, I believe it's responsible for rebirth.
It's the birth-death.
The birth-death cycle. So it's interesting. These three are really powerful energies for next year and possibly going into 2023 around creating that devotional practice, releasing reactivity and resentment, creating more expansion in your availability to handle more stress or more tension that's coming at you in the external environment, being the eye of the storm. And it does take conscious practice. And this is why having a regular practice, either in the morning or in the evening, or connecting consciously into how you're feeling and making changes, is what's required. And it might be very difficult to do that, but if you do choose to do that, that's the beautiful thing about this, is it says, that it might be very difficult to do these sorts of things to get to rebirth. But if you choose to do it, you'll be rewarded greatly.
The process is more important than the goal.
Oh, yes.
Right now, it's that is really the essence of it. It is just do the process and don't be attached to the outcome or the goal, because it's a moving target.
Well, the process builds character.
Yes,
it builds character as well. So if we look at
a period of character building right now on the planet.
Yes, and Shane and I, we've kind of settled in and going, all right, this is probably going to go till 2023 to 2020, possibly even 2026, and then there is a recession that's charted for 2026. So getting ourselves ready.
That's an economic recession around 2026.
Yeah. So if we have a look at what we can do to prepare ourselves, we've got 3-4 years to get ourselves ready. And that's why it's so important to do this character building, to do this process before you get there, because then when it does happen, it's not going to be like, the sky is falling. You'll be probably one of the ones that are standing strong in themselves, asking others, how can I help you? And that's what I think we need a lot more people, to be the eye of the storm, to be able to be of support to others. Anything else you'd like to add? No. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with us. Please drop in some comments, Jamie. It's good to see you here.
Jamie.
I know you would understand the devotional practices as well. So we invite you to, share some of this information with others. If this really resonates with you and it's something that you want to take on for yourself, share it with others so you can start to be responsible and accountable to each other. I think the more people that take these steps, the more people that are going to be raising their vibration to be able to, when I say raising their vibration, helping others through difficult time. I think we need more helpers and healers these days.
It's time to be in the Goldilocks zone. Not too much, not too little, just down the middle.
Moderation is key. Thanks for spending some time with us, and we'll catch you guys next time.